Most people thought the old Bennett farm would disappear quietly. Within a few years, the land was aging. The fences leaned, and the farmhouse roof had needed paint for almost a decade. But the valley had its own memory, and 17-year-old Claire Bennett had spent her whole life learning how to read it. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy calm emotional stories about small towns, hidden truths, farms, and people being underestimated, subscribe and become part of the channel. The Bennett farm sat along the western edge of Dry Creek Valley in northern Wyoming, where the wind moved slowly through open pasture and winters arrived earlier than people expected. The property covered just under 240 acres now, though Claire's grandfather liked to say the land used to feel bigger before highways and investors started measuring everything in dollars instead of distance. The farmhouse had been built in 1924 by Claire's great-grandfather using timber cut from the hills north of the creek. The porch sagged slightly toward the east corner. The barn roof creaked loudly during storms, and every spring the lower pasture flooded just enough to leave behind silver streaks of river mud that dried hard beneath the grass. Claire noticed things most people ignored. She noticed the way cattle avoided certain ground after heavy rain, where deer crossed the creek during dry summers, and the strange cold spots near the cottonwood trees even in July. And she wrote everything down in a faded black notebook her grandfather kept beside the kitchen window. Water levels, migration paths, soil changes, tree sickness, broken fence lines. Her grandfather called it listening to the land. Most people in Dry Creek thought old Harold Bennett was simply stubborn. Claire knew better. The first trucks arrived in late March, black SUVs, white survey pickups, utility trailers carrying drilling equipment. Men in expensive jackets, standing beside folding tables with maps spread across them. A week later, the news reached town. Officially, Westbridge National Bank had purchased more than 8,000 acres of ranch land surrounding the Bennett property through its commercial development division. People at the feed store talked about distribution centers, warehouses, processing facilities, a private energy project. Nobody seemed entirely sure, but everyone agreed on one thing: the valley was about to change forever. Claire watched the survey crews from the fence line one cold morning while replacing loose wire near the south pasture. One of the men waved politely toward her. Another pointed toward the creek while looking at a digital map. And then Claire saw something that made her stop walking. They were placing marker flags directly across the lower basin beside Dry Creek, the soft ground, the dangerous ground. Her grandfather stepped beside her quietly, hands buried inside his coat pockets. They're building too low, Claire said. Harold looked toward the markers for a long moment before answering. Looks that way. They don't know what happens there in wet years. No, he said softly. They probably don't. 3 days later, Claire met the bank representatives for the first time. She had ridden down toward the creek on horseback early that morning and found 4 engineers standing near a portable drilling rig beside the basin. One woman introduced herself as Rachel Mercer, project supervisor for Westbridge Development Holdings. She seemed kind enough. Tired maybe, but polite. We're doing preliminary soil tests, Rachel explained. This area is perfect for Phase 1 construction. Claire looked across the basin again. No, she said quietly, isn't. One of the engineers glanced up from his tablet with the patient expression adults often use with teenagers. They assume are guessing you know this ground. He asked. My whole life. Rachel smiled politely. What's the concern? Claire pointed toward the basin. There's water underneath it. The engineer nodded faintly. Groundwater exists all over the valley. No, Claire said again, not like this. She walked toward the edge of the basin and pushed the heel of her boot into the grass. The surface looked dry, but beneath it the ground shifted strangely, soft underneath, hollow almost. The creek used to run through here, she explained, before my grandfather was born. Rachel exchanged a quick glance with the engineer. We reviewed historical maps, he said gently. The current creek channel is over 400 yards east. Claire shook her head. The water moved above ground, she said, not below it. For a moment nobody answered. Then the younger engineer gave a small polite smile. Well, he said, that's what the drilling reports are for. Claire nodded. Once her grandfather always said there was no point arguing with people who trusted paperwork more than whether construction began in June. And the valley changed fast. After that, bulldozers flattened the basin. Concrete trucks rolled through town from sunrise until dark. Steel supports rose beside the creek like giant gray skeletons. And all summer long Claire kept writing in the notebook. June 18th, water standing beneath Westfield after dry weather. July to cattle refusing lower fence crossing. July 11th, mud rising through gravel near construction road in August. The first problem appeared: a section of foundation near the loading area sank almost 3 inches overnight. Workers blamed faulty concrete. Repairs were ordered immediately 2 weeks later. Another section shifted, then another. The ground beneath the basin wasn't stable. It moved slowly at first. Then all at once by September, drainage pipes began backing up with muddy water. Cracks spread across the concrete slabs, and one retaining wall tilted nearly 4 degrees off alignment. Engineers returned. More drilling began, deeper this time 42 feet down. They finally found it, an enormous underground water channel buried beneath the valley floor, the original Dry Creek riverbed. Exactly where Claire said was. The discovery shut the entire project down. Within days, construction crews disappeared almost overnight. Legal teams arrived instead. Environmental reports, emergency meetings. Soil specialists from Denver and Salt Lake City. The basin could never safely support the kind of structures the bank planned to build. The underground channel constantly shifted water pressure beneath the surface, destabilizing everything above it. Fixing the problem would cost tens of millions of dollars, but the part people remembered wasn't the money, it was the meeting. At the county office in October, Claire sat beside her grandfather, wearing a denim jacket and holding the old black notebook in both hands, while executives from Westbridge filled the opposite side of the room. One engineer presented maps showing the underground channel curving beneath the basin exactly as Claire described months earlier. The room stayed quiet for a long time afterward. Finally, Rachel Mercer looked across the table at Claire. "You knew," she said softly. Claire shrugged slightly. "My grandfather did." Rachel glanced toward Harold Bennett. The old farmer sat quietly beside his granddaughter, hands folded calmly in front of him. "We should have listened sooner," Rachel admitted. Harold nodded. "Once the land usually tells people the truth," he said. "Problem is, most folks are too busy trying to improve it to hear it talking." The bank redesigned the entire project. That winter, the lower basin was left untouched and eventually placed under conservation protection. After state environmental recommendations, construction moved north onto firmer ground above the valley shelf, and the underground river stayed exactly where it had always been. In spring, Claire found a package waiting on the porch addressed to her. Inside was a professionally bound site report from Westbridge National Bank. Attached to the front was a handwritten note from Rachel Mercer. "You were right about the basin. We named the protected water corridor after your grandfather. The Bennett Channel will remain untouched." Claire carried the report outside to the porch, where Harold sat watching evening mist settle across the pasture. The valley looked the same as it always had, cottonwood trees moving softly in the wind, cattle near the creek, water beneath the earth following paths older than maps. Her grandfather read the note quietly before handing it back. Then he looked out across the basin and smiled faintly. "Land keeps records," he said, and somewhere far beneath the grass, the hidden river kept moving through the valley exactly the way it always had.